Hi, I'm Mike, and this is an intro. Alright, what we got here is one of my favorite generals to run, Cromat. Now, the normal way to do this guy is to just put out a bunch of mana acceleration, drop him on the field, swing at your opponent, and use his red-white ability to buff him up until 21 and just knock out your opponent because 21 general damage. It's a really easy EDH variant. If you have enough mana, you can give him the red-blue ability, give him flying. If he's blocked, give him the black-white ability to destroy whatever's blocking or blocked by him before it can do damage. And if someone's going to do some crazy exile bottom of the library stuff, just blue-green to put him back on your library so you get him right away. Or just regenerate him flat out if he's destroyed. He does anything, which out of all the 5-color generals, unless you're running Slivers, I actually think Cromat is the best. Slivers, of course, has the one that, actually 3 now that I won't even talk about because Slivers. But yeah, unlike some of the others, this guy can do pretty much anything, and he's good at it. He's not great at anything, but he can do everything. That said, I wanted to go with a different variant than the usual swing Cromat win. That still can happen, but for a different reason, because this is Cromat Auras. Well, Auras and Enchantments because they're both awesome, but yeah, here we go. First up, just gonna turn this guy around here. Oh, by the way, I love these sleeves. They don't fit well, but I love these sleeves for, you can probably guess why. I'm a bit of a fan of this one particular genre. Or what should I say, book, movie series, whatever the heck it is now. Alright. Utopia Sprawl, Market Festival, Fertile Ground, Trace of Abundance. Wow, my camera's going weird. And Dawn's Reflection. Here, I'll try switching them around so it's not as bright. That's odd. Yeah, what you can see here is that these cards are not usually this bright. Hope you forgive me while my camera automatically adjusts. But yeah, all these cards, what they do is that they take, well, they produce mana. I put them on a land, I tap it, I get something more out of it. Now, there's a few little variations. The basic one is Fertile Ground. Pay 2, put it on a land, tap that land, get an extra mana out of it. Dawn's Reflection is double that for double the cost. Trace of Abundance is Fertile Ground, but it has Shroud, so you can't reuse it. And Utopia Sprawl is just, you have to play on a forest, you name the color, it only produces that, and they're all good. Market Festival is basically a Fertile Ground, but adds 2 mana of any combination for 4. Yeah, it's not great, but it's good. It's literally a functional reprint of Dawn's Reflection. All this does is say, if I have green mana and maybe a few other colors, I can essentially start ramping my deck quickly with enchantments, which have been eroded to Aura, in this case at least. And I can start producing the colors I need. Because this is a 5-color deck, I'm going to need a lot of fixing and more mana. This does both. After that, though, I'm going to get into the regular auras. Now, this isn't a full deck list, so I'm not going to show you the artifacts I use, or the lands, or even some of the general spells like Diabolic Tutor or some of the others, because they're just kind of a given. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, but for the most part, if it's kind of a standard card for EDH and not really something that fits with the theme I'm going over, you can assume it's in there. I'll eventually get around to putting the entire deck list online, and I really gotta get around to doing that sooner. Alright, next up though, we have the enchantments that are not auras, but really help the deck come along. Some are scarier than others. One that's absurdly good and you should always get rid of, if your opponent plays it, Sylvan Library. Okay, my camera's going weird, but yeah, still very bright. Sylvan Library. At the beginning of your draw phase, you may draw 2 additional cards. And then, you can either keep them in the hand for 4 life per card, or you could put 2 of them back in any order. Essentially, you're scrying, but it counts as draw. And it's a May ability, so you don't have to. On the other hand, if you forget, well, you're out of luck. It just gives you a good way to move through your deck a little faster for 2 mana. Next up, a 1-2 punch of Privileged Position and Sterling Grove. The green-white combo that just does amazing things. And you could probably read it if my camera wasn't so washed out with white today. I don't know. What is up with that? Privileged Position gives all other permanents you control basically hexproof. It's before the actual keyword came out, so it actually spells out what it does. Sterling Grove, on the other hand, gives all other enchantments you control, well, Shroud. Which is odd because they don't spell out Shroud, so this is before the keyword came out for that. The good thing about Sterling Grove, though, is while it is open to being hit, you could pay 1, sack it, and then get the enchantment of your choice from your library into your hand. You have to shuffle after that, but still. If you can keep it out, put it with Privileged Position, and you just don't lose auras anymore to direct destruction. Or, if you really need a card to win the game and it's an aura, just sack the Sterling for 1, and you're going to get the aura you need, or the enchantment you need. Specifically, things you might want to get with that are Ghostly Prison, Propaganda, and the, oh dear god, I can barely see it on my camera, Sphere of Safety. Propaganda and Ghostly Prison are more or less functional reprints of each other, with a little variation. Mostly that one's in blue and one's in white. They're the same cost, Maya's color, and they both say creatures can attack you unless their controller pays 2 for each creature attacking. Yeah, it's a solid effect, it's an enchantment, and if you're not really in a good board state yet, this will save you from anyone with a large field, and it will stop almost every swarm deck on its own. Together, they add up and make it even harder for single creatures. Sphere of Safety, though, is bonkers. Is that a word? Well, I hope it is. It's a 5-drop, so it's a little expensive, but a creature can attack you or a planeswalker you control, which is nice because they finally added that in, because before they could attack the planeswalker and circumvent Propaganda or Sphere of Safety. Wow. Misspoke there. The other 2 cards I discussed, not Sphere of Safety. But it's for X, where X is the number of enchantments you control. In this deck, that number gets so ridiculously high that unless they have infinite mana, and it's EDH, so that's actually a concern, they will not be able to attack you. That usually stops a lot of people from hitting you early, mid, late, anytime during the game. Granted, it's an enchantment, so you can get rid of it. There's a lot of things that can be done to it. But in EDH, most people don't run straight aura hate. It's usually combined with something else, and there might be better targets than this. Next up, 2 cards that are also pretty good together. Wild Pair and Maelstrom Nexus. We'll start with Nexus. It's a 5-drop, has 1 of each color in its cost, and it says, whenever you play the first spell each turn, it has Cascade. Well, it doesn't quite say that, it's paraphrased, but yeah. It's an enchantment that lets me get more value out of my deck. And I'm dropping some high and low cost cards here. The low ones will pull out other low cards, which are usually setup pieces. So early on, if I get this out, and I play a low cost spell in the next turn, I'm going to get another low cost spell that will help me set up. Late game, though, I'm going to probably drop bigger things, and it can go either way with that one, actually. I can get something else that's really good off it, or something that'll help me set up for the next thing I play. And either way, I'm okay with that. I mean, even just dropping an extra enchantment for the things like Sphere of Safety, which counts enchantments, is good. Wild Pair, on the other hand, is a little more iffy sometimes. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, if you cast it from your hand, you may search your library for a creature card with the same total power and toughness, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. That said, you basically add together power and toughness, find a creature that would have the same total power and toughness added together, and then you put it onto the field. For example, a 2-1 and a 0-3 would have the same total added together, so you could put them in one after the other. What you gotta do is consider the little math behind it. Basically, look at your cards. If they have similar power and toughness, you're pretty much set. I run a lot of 5/5s that are bigger that I want to get out at the same time because they complement each other. I also run a bunch of 1/1s, 1/2s, 2/1s, and I think there's 1/0/2 to complement the 1/1s. So they can all function into each other. So this thing just brings up a lot more value than I pay into it. Now that's simply because of how I have the deck set up creature-wise. Otherwise, if you have something with even less creatures or even more creatures, it can vary. For how I have the deck set up, this works out to always give me more than I want. Both cards, though, accelerate my deck. And last up, the 2 cards of the Stray Enchantments that are just... they change the game. Finest Hour. 5-drop. Banned colors of green, white, and blue. Exalted, so whenever a creature attacks alone from your side, it gets +1/+1 until the end of turn. Not bad. Whenever a creature you control attacks alone, if it's the first combat phase of the turn, untap that creature. After this phase, there is an additional combat phase. 2 attack phases in a single turn. That's not bad. Now, with just a simple small creature, that wouldn't be anything important. But this is an aura deck. It's going to be Voltron style, where things are going to be added together, and I am going to be dropping a lot of really big, scary items. Having something attack twice in a turn is a massive advantage, especially with some of the other cards later on. Similar to Spirit of Resistance. If you've played this card before, played someone who's used this card before, it is... How is it not banned? I mean, dear God, look at this thing! It's a 3-drop, 2 colorless and a white. Enchantment. If you control a permanent of each color, prevent all damage that will be dealt to you. Such as your general. Because it is a permanent of each color. It doesn't say 1 permanent of each color. That would make it a little less insane. But for the essential cost of I cast my general, or I have a lot of things on the field, and I just don't take damage anymore. This will stop a swarm deck so badly that they won't even bother getting rid of my earlier cards like Propaganda. Because this thing stops them in such a complete way that I've actually had people say, nope, you have me in a soft lock, I can't win, I give up. That doesn't usually happen because most people have still utilized things to get rid of creatures and enchantments. But this is such a good lock on the game that you can buy yourself easily 4 or 5 turns, if not more, to the entire game to do whatever you need. It is insane what it can do, and it's just a 3-drop. Yeah! Invasion had some really scary cards. Not as scary as some of the earlier blocks, but dear God, this is still an amazing card. Okay, enough ranting over that one card, which is completely worth ranting over. Next up, I'm going to start getting into the auras. Specifically, the ones that I'll use for a Voltron-style win. The one thing I like about auras, specifically Canopy Cover, is that it's just very much a utility card. It's a 2-drop, green, and colorless, and it goes on a creature you control. That creature is basically a Signal Pest variant. It has flying without having flying. Enchanted creature can't be blocked except by creatures with flying or reach. And enchanted creature can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponent controls. So essentially it gives hexproof and pseudo-flying. All the benefits of flying without being able to block flying. So it doesn't also take the damage from things that target flyers, which is nice. That said, it also has hexproof. This is also early on when hexproof wasn't a keyword yet. It was just a little thing they were playing with. This is a very important card for whenever, say, you start stacking auras onto a creature that isn't naturally hexproof or resilient. This makes it so they're so much harder to kill. Because again, auras. You put enough on a creature, it doesn't matter if it's a general or a good creature to start, it will end as just a giant killing stick. If that's a thing. But it is now, because reasons. After that, Daybreak Coronet. I'll admit, this is a god-awful expensive card, and I got it before Modern came out, so it was not as expensive. It was maybe $2 or $3 when I got it. And I thought I was paying too much, honestly, at the time. Having seen the price jump up, I am not thinking that anymore because, dear God, there are more digits than I would like to think of. Okay, there's still just 1 digit more than I like to think of, but I'm counting that as a good thing on my part. Now, there is a small drawback, despite the fact that it's a 2-drop, 2 white, and it's a buff of +3/+3, First Strike, Vigilance, and Lifelink. You know, that little amount. It has to be on a creature with another aura on it. That said, it can also be removed if you destroy the aura prior to this one. So if it's the only aura on something, or becomes the only aura, it just doesn't work. Yeah, but again, this deck is going to be aura heavy. You will have auras on creatures. You will have an absurd, grotesque amount of auras on creatures if you go with this kind of deck. That's never a concern. Shield of the Oversoul. I personally think that some of the best auras in the game, besides coming out of the previous set just because of the card I showed you before this, all the really good auras came out of Lorwyn. They're temperamental sometimes because of color restrictions, but say if your general is 5 colors, that isn't at all an issue. This is a 3-drop of green or white and 2 colorless, so there's options right there, and has +1/+1 and indestructible if the creature is green, 5 color will be, and +1/+1 and flying if the creature is white, which the general will be. Right there, that takes my 5/5 general from a 5/5, of course, to a 9/9 flying indestructible. That right there is a 3-hit kill in general damage. The fact that I can regen my general, I can buff him more, and do all those crazy little shenanigans with him that are completely unfair, makes this card right here a win condition if given enough time. And when added to cards like, say, Armadillo Cloak, which gives trample, +2/+2, and non-keyworded lifelink, which stacks, but is slightly slower in the tagging, triggering, phase, turn, dealy, the word that I can't seem to remember at the turn. But basically, on lifelink, this card gives you a bigger bonus, it gives you trample in case he's blocked, and this will be added to life afterwards. So you can get more life than what you deal damage with this. Similar to Steel of the Godhead, another one out of Lorwyn, further proving that Lorwyn had some broken enchantments. Here, I'm going to move the camera a bit because it is kind of bugging me how bright this is. I guess it's better, but... Ooh, hey, what'd I do there? Yeah. Alright. Where was I? Oh yeah, I'm ranting about the awesome card. Steel of the Godhead. If it's blue, it gets +1/+1 and unblockable. On general, I don't need to explain why that's insane. The fact that it gives +1/+1 and lifelink to a white creature, that is also insane because it will stack with Armadillo Cloak. So if I do 10 damage, I get 20 life. The lifelink gives it immediately when I do damage, and the non-keyworded lifelink will give it right after all combat damage, and the little phase right there ends. So a small timing issue, meaning that you can automatically kill with certain things, but that's really not such a big deal in this deck. It's just more added benefit to pad your life. Unblockable, though, of course, is broken on in general, because eventually you'll get to the point where I swing, person dies, I move on. If I give extra attack phases, 2 people die. A way to get that quicker is Spirit Mantle. It's a +1/+1, protection from creatures, and it's just 2-drop. Now, it's a little redundant, because Steel of the Godhead gives unblockable already, and this is about unblockable. The difference is, this gets me by regardless, while this just says I can't be damaged, or the creature at least, can't be damaged, targeted, or blocked by creatures. Which is a really good way, because there's a lot of creature abilities out there that could still get rid of someone. Say, just tap, do damage. Tap, steal, tap, break. There's so many things. This stops. It's also protection alongside of just getting through someone. Also up, indestructibility. It's probably one of the most self-explanatory cards I know, because it makes your creature indestructible. 4-drop, little expensive, but at the same time, indestructible. I have another card that does that. Let's see, where's it? Right here. But again, redundancy. I really like redundancy because I'm not sure which one would I get in hand. I'd rather have both. Speaking of redundancy, Pentarch Ward. This one is a little iffy still. If I find something better, I probably will go with it. What it does is, it's a 3-drop, and when it enters the battlefield, I choose a color. Pentarch Ward is not affected if that color is white. So it'll stay on, but everything else white will go off, and it can't be affected by white anymore. And when it enters the battlefield, I can draw a card. So on the one hand, this is a situational card, because if I'm playing maybe a 1-color deck or a 2-color deck where one thing is predominant, cough, cough, blue, cough, cough, sorry, something in my throat, this will take care of issues. And it'll help me draw a card. That said, I use auras of quite a few colors, so it can also hurt me. It's very situational, but in the situations where it works, it's a win condition. In much the same way that Chromatic Core is a win condition in auras. Okay, technically it's a 5-drop creature too, but it has Bestow for 7. That's a little high, but flying, first strike, vigilance, trample, lifelink, +4/+4. That's not a bad cost. For 7, it's closer, but if I look at it this way, it's still +4/+4, flying, trample, vigilance, lifelink. Oh, and first strike. That takes my general and makes it a 9/9, I will kill you. Heck, all it's missing is Death Touch for the I just get everything combo. Auramancers, guys. Enchanted creature has +2/+2 for each aura attached to it and has vigilance. Now it's a 4-drop and it's blue, so those aren't really colors that a lot of auras have. So I'm going to have to make sure to have that mana up. Normally I would just have maybe 1 blue for covering my butt, just to make sure I can get my general out. 2 might be a little harder because I won't bother. But with the earlier cards I showed that mana fix, the auras that do that, it's not that big of a concern. The fact that this aura counts itself, that is a concern because it is amazing! This is exponential. If I have Animar, or, okay, not Animar because this is a different deck. If I have Cromat out and he has maybe 1 or 2 other enchantments, I drop this for 4. It's a swing buff of 6 because it counts itself and the 2 others on it. If I add more as the game goes on, that's another 2. This thing builds, and it builds quickly. And, vigilance isn't something to shake a stick at because you can attack and defend. And with this guy, with any card that has lifelink and double lifelink, that not just says that you will be able to get a lot of life when you attack, but if anyone attacks you, they have to be able to do more damage than you gain off blocking one of their creatures. Which is kind of a scary prospect when you can't actually outdamage someone because they're gaining more off you than they're doing. In a similar way, that Ethereal Armor does that too. On the one hand, this is a 1-drop, so I like it way more. And it gives a buff for every enchantment you control, not just on that creature, so it'll probably be used a lot more often. On the other hand, it does it for 1/1s only. So it will usually be better. Okay, I'll be honest, it is always better, and it has first strike, which is really good if for some reason the other guy has, like, Exile. The Cauldron Blade, or maybe some of the other odd little equipments that have given Exile on damage. There's a few out there, and they're downright terrifying. Or if someone dropped a Charisma on a creature. I don't want to lose anyone, so I really don't want that to happen. Charisma, it's an aura that I, for some reason, don't have in this deck. Not sure why. That says whenever you deal damage to a creature, at the end of turn, you control it. Or actually, then you control it for as long as you control Charisma. It's broken in certain uses. But yeah, Ethereal Armor. It's a 1-drop that turns the game around because there's going to be a spam load. I'm hoping that's a lot of things, specifically auras, on the battlefield. And it's enchantments you control, so if you give it to someone else or they steal it, it doesn't count. But, yeah, it doesn't really matter too much. After that, just a few other, small cards, like Ancestral Mask. It's a 3-drop, so it's a little more expensive, but it says enchanted creature gets +2/+2 for each other enchantment in play. The downside is it doesn't count itself. The upside is that it doubles upon what the previous card did, Ethereal Armor, and it goes 1 better, okay, well more than 1, by doubling that to 2, and including what your opponents play as well. So if someone else is doing an aura deck, or just using a few enchantments to help space themselves out, this will give you a nice buff for that. This thing wins the game usually when you drop it, because you put it on a big creature, specifically your general, you get it flying, you hit someone, and there's going to be enough damage to kill them. Now, it doesn't count itself, but that's really the only downside there is. After that, there's just 2 more big baddies. And, well, the first one, someone might not realize how good it is until it kills them. The other one, they will attack you flat out because they know how good it is. Ruins of the Dais and Eldrazi Conscription. Eldrazi Conscription I don't really need to go into too much detail over. It's +10/+10, Trample, Annihilator 2. Now it's an 8-drop, but it's colorless 8-drop, so that's actually easier to get out than most of the cards in this deck. Which is a really weird thing to say for anything Eldrazi. But yeah, that you don't really need to explain why that's good. It just hits, it just wins. And if you attack enough, you'll annihilate away most things if they're not running a token deck. Runes of EDH, though, is actually a little better. That's the scary part. As long as the enchanted creature is green, it gets +1/+1 and has trample. Okay, for a 5-drop, that's underwhelming. As long as enchanted creature is red, it gets +1/+1 and has double strike. Okay, for a 5-drop, that's a little underwhelming. Considering I'll be dropping this onto a 5-color, 5 for 5, with a lot of other enchantments on it, and that's a net bonus of a minimum of +2, unless there's other enchantments making it higher, it'll give it trample, which means I'll get over anyone blocking it, and I'm going to give it double strike, so any damage I do is now doubled. And include that with some of the effects I've already shown that say I get lifelink and then non-keyword lifelink. That takes 2 instances of lifelink on regular attack and doubles that. So I'm doing damage and then getting 4 times that in life. This is the point where you just say, unless you do general damage or infect me to death, I win. Because you will so quickly get into the absurd life combos that you don't have a chance of losing. It just goes out of hand. That, and most people don't really realize it because it doesn't look that insane. Then you're going to hit them with it, and they will never make that mistake again. Alright, that's most of the auras. Nice little field there. Again, I'm a little partial auras in general, so I might be a little too favorable with them. Who am I kidding? I'm not too favorable. They're awesome. Next up, though, I'm going to go through some of the creatures. Now, this is a little harder because they need to be able to really work well off auras, and some of them show that. Others are there for different reasons. For example, the first two. Bloom Tender and Joiner Adept. Let's get that in the actual camera. Alright. Joiner Adept is a 2-drop elf, 2/1. Like I mentioned, I had one of those, yeah. That says tap lands, or lands you control have tap. Add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. This is just straight mana fixing. I also have some of the Chromatic Lantern in here. I'm not showing it because it's an artifact, and it's kind of standard for this many colors, so I'm not really bothering. Heck, I probably didn't even need to show Joiner Adept, but it's in there because it will fix my mana colors. So if I'm screwed on one, I will get it. Bloom Tender, on the other hand, is the perfect card for any 5-color deck. This is... I'm not even going to lie and say this is anything less than perfect. It is a 2-drop that says, tap, for each color among permanents you control, add 1 mana to your pool of that color. You have a 5-color general, and a lot of cards that are 5 colors. Theoretically, now this card doesn't play off right away. You need to have something in the pool for it to work up, and, well, by pool I probably should say in the field. But the second you do, this could easily double your mana. Say if you got 5, you drop your general, and next turn you drop this. Okay, not bad. Then you have 10 mana off a single creature, doubling it. That is not bad. That is really good. I don't think I need to say more because it is just kind of insane how well that works. Next up, though, I have a few pretty obvious ones. Concerning its enchantments, what's better than the Enchantresses and Core Spirit Dancer? These two are functional reprints in green and white. They basically say whenever you cast an enchantment card, you may, well, play the enchantment spell, you may draw a card. You don't have to succeed, so if it's countered, you still get to draw. Thank God for that, because that is fun. Especially when people figure out that they need to counter some of these things or destroy them right away, because they are scary if they stay. That, and they're 0/2s. So they have a little defense, but that's not really that important. You're never going to attack with them. Unless you drop the auras on them, in which case, they're scary. If nothing else, they're a base. When it comes to a base, though, Core Spirit Dancer, it only lets you draw a card whenever you cast an aura spell, which is a little more restrictive. On the other hand, it gets +2/+2 for each aura attached to it. So as a base, it gets scary really fast. Doesn't even have to be good enchantments. Indestructible makes this a small threat. Everything else makes it an ungodly threat. And, people will try and kill it when they see it. And they will be right to do that. Alright, next up. E-Witness and Nomad Mythmaker. Okay, E-Witness I probably don't need to explain too much because it's pretty common to see around. When it enters the battlefield, you may return target card from your graveyard to your hand. 3-drop, 2/1.